Now the region's news. Good evening. Management at Ipswich Docks are calling for the controversial National Dock Labour Scheme to be scrapped. The 40-year-old scheme gives dockers wide-ranging powers. Through their union they decide who's employed and what manning levels should be. Now John Evelyn from the dock management says restrictive practices are stopping expansion of the port, which could create thousands of jobs. Union officials say the practices are fair and add it was management who introduced them. They threaten strike action if the scheme is dropped. The Army is investigating the death of a teenager who drowned yesterday in a lake at Bassingbourne Barracks in Cambridgeshire. 14-year-old Jonathan Drinkwater from Tadlow couldn't swim and drowned when the makeshift raft he was playing on overturned. Police divers found his body 3 hours later. A Northamptonshire policeman has been fined for falsifying the accounts of the staff canteen. PC William Watson was canteen treasurer at Rushton when he took more than £220 from funds. He paid it back with interest 2 months later, but still admitted false accounting at Northampton Crown Court today. Watson was fined £150 with £320 costs. The court heard he was likely to be dismissed from the force. A Peterborough school has been attacked by vandals for the second time in a fortnight. Every room at the Highleys Junior School was damaged, fire extinguishers were let off and windows were broken. Parents joined staff as they spent the day cleaning up debris and say they're furious because the children's education was disrupted. The school is expected to reopen tomorrow. The Corby MP William Powell is pressing the Transport Secretary Paul Channon to help stop animals being killed on the roads. Mr Powell has tabled a parliamentary question because he's concerned about the number of dogs, cats, rabbits and hedgehogs run over by motorists. Well, that's the news this evening. Don't forget there's more during breakfast time tomorrow morning from all of us. A very good night to you. Good night.
Hello to you. The big weather story around the world over recent days has been the drought in the United States. This was a satellite picture taken around midday today. It's not all that clear, at least the coastline isn't all that clear, so let me pinpoint a few places for you. Here the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, California. And you can see it's right down in the south that we've only got rain-bearing cloud, just the odd isolated shower in northern parts, but for the bulk of the United States it's clear skies, so the drought continues. No such droughts at home. This band of cloud will be bringing some heavy rain into western parts of Scotland, and today we've had some heavy showers over parts of England, some of them of hail and thunder, and at Ketsworth near Oxfordshire they had 15 millimetres in 15 minutes, so that was fairly typical of some of the heavy showers that we had. Tomorrow there will be, I think, 1 or 2 showers around in the southeast, but nothing like what they were today. Tonight then, fairly cloudy picture for Northern Ireland and Scotland, some heavy bursts of rain coming through and some hill fog as well. But for much of England and Wales, a dry night, though there'll still be 1 or 2 showers at first down here in the extreme southeast. The temperatures tonight, well, it'll be fairly humid, I think, for much of England. In London, for example, the temperature likely to fall no lower than 14 degrees Celsius. Elsewhere, the lowest temperature is likely to be 9 here in some parts of Wales and in Scotland. Some fog rolling into the southwest and fog lingering on in the extreme north. 1 or 2 misted fog patches over England and Wales as well. Tomorrow that cloud will move on. In fact, it's this cold front, but as it moves southwards then pressure will build behind it, and that will bring some brighter weather, particularly into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, with some sunshine later in the day. For the south and east, fairly cloudy. There will be patchy rain around, the rain turning much more showery as we move further south, but some eastern places, in the shelter of high ground, will probably stay dry right throughout the day. No showers in the southeast, the best of any warm sunshine down in the extreme southwest. The wind's generally fairly light, but picking up to a northwesterly of around about 15 miles in the north, and that'll turn it fairly cool, around about 15 degrees Celsius, 24 at best in the south. That's it from me. Good night.
Tomorrow on 1, crystal clear. Richard is a diabetic with failing eyesight. Thomasina has been blind from birth.
I think you're very beautiful.
Am I?
Yes, you are.
But Richard has other ties that bind.
Do we have a relationship?
Yes, of course we've got a relationship.
Well, then it has to be something more than an occasional vindaloo.
I've lost my sight, you see.
Do you have an appointment? Hello, Mrs. King.
Oh, no, I didn't know I was going to lose it.
I just feel so inadequate, Richard. I feel as if I should be able to help you in some way, but I don't know how to. I can't even imagine what it could be like.
As disability tightens its grip, the pressure on Richard increases.
You never give any anything in your relationship, Richard. There isn't 1 ounce of commitment in you. You live in a dream world!
Crystal Clear, tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC One.
Back to Monday evening, and in 40 minutes there's the excitement of the US Open Golf Playoff and match of the day from the opening session of Wimbledon 88. Before that, on BBC One, tonight's Panorama. Ian Smith reports on Britain's new rich and the responsibilities the government now expects of them.
Went now. It's 112.5 to 25. Charmer now. Charmer, £14 a 2. The
Money, said Francis Bacon 400 years ago, is like muck. No good unless it is spread. Britain's top rates of tax are now amongst the lowest in Europe. There's more money around than ever before.
There's a lot of money about.
10, 100.
Best guinea's been for 30 years.
Best guinea's for 30 years.
Britain now has the fastest growing economy in Europe, and Newmarket near Cambridge is the heart of one of the most affluent areas in the country. Racing only one example of the rich reinvesting their wealth.
British businessmen now, who've done very, very well in the city, are reinvesting big sums of money in and around Newmarket.
When you talk of big sums of money, how much are you talking about?
Oh, you're talking about millions now.
The rules of achievement in Enterprise Britain now demand that the successful should be set free to earn, spend and invest as they will. How much have the two of you invested in racing over the last few years?
Over the last 20 years, I would say about...
It's £10 million.
That's £10 million.
£10 million.
It's our hobby.
And the rich are getting even richer. A leading firm of international business consultants today published figures showing that pay for the top 10% of Britain's chief executives has now broken through the £300,000 a year barrier.
The payoff is that the person who now earns £300,000 is the best person. If you want the second best person, then you just pay £200,000.
To the government's opponents, it's a loads-of-money economy. The ostentatious squandering of an unfair distribution of wealth. But this summer, the Prime Minister set out to give the new capitalism new justification.
We are told that we must work and use our talents to create wealth. If a man will not work, he shall not eat, wrote St. Paul to the Thessalonians. Indeed, abundance rather than poverty has a legitimacy which derives from the very nature of creation. Nevertheless, the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, recognizes that making money and owning things could become selfish activities. But it's not the creation of wealth that is wrong, but love of money for its own sake. The spiritual dimension comes in deciding what one does with the wealth.
In her speech to the Church of Scotland, the Prime Minister established a new dimension to the political debate. Mrs. Thatcher has always in the past emphasised the need for wealth creation. But now, as Britain begins to boom again, she's added a moral dimension, the individual responsibilities of those who have wealth. And in doing so, she has begun to answer those critics who have argued that her government has produced nothing more nor less than an acquisitive and selfish society. A society which those critics now argue has become even more divided as a result of the last budget. Merchant bankers Morgan Grenfell calculate that after the budget cuts, those on £11,000 a year, average earnings, are now only 1.6% better off. That's £3.40 a week. But if you're on £60,000, you're now 12% better off, about £120 a week. But for those top executives now on £300,000 a year, they're nearly 20% richer with over £1,000 a week extra cash that they don't have to give to the state.
This government has created a degree of unfairness that has not been seen since the war. The gap between rich and poor is widening at a rate it has not done this century. And the result of that is not just that more people are in poverty as a result of their policies, but also that there is a threat to social cohesion.
I don't look at the politics of envy. I don't actually look to see if someone's a lot better off. What I'm concerned of is that I am better off, that I can look after my family well, that I can take responsibility for decisions in my life. And that is actually happening today.
But isn't that selfishness?
No, far from it. It's the exact opposite of selfishness. It's taking responsibility for myself.
Lord Harris, a personal friend of Mrs. Thatcher, is one of the keepers of the free enterprise flame. He argues that for the enterprise culture to deliver prosperity to everyone, the gap between the rich and the poor must increase.
I've often tried to work out what are the real differentials between the humblest participant in this economic system and the most dominant, the most powerful, the most creative, the most inventive, you know, the great captains of industry. And the differential isn't 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 or 100 to 1, it's thousands to 1. I mean, the role of some people, they're not always nice people, by the way. They're often, in all kinds of ways, inadequate. But in terms of their effectiveness in spotting opportunities, building up new positions, expanding employment and so forth, their role is a multiplier of thousands to 1.
The Thatcher doctrine has a common catchphrase, trickle down. Just by encouraging the successful, they will spend more, invest more, give more. The money they put out will trickle from the rich to the poorest. All should benefit from the prosperity of the few. What the rich do with their money puts this theory to the test. Terry Hitchcock has just become rich. He's 35 and doesn't have to work again. He's a family man, a wife and a young son. He lives south of Cambridge in a prosperous rural village. He was a partner in a big city stockbroking firm on a 6-figure salary. Then his company was bought out and he came away richer by well over £1 million.
I think I felt I was very, very fortunate. Let's start off with that point. There is, in my experience, no relationship in any kind of right sense between what somebody does and what somebody earns. I think, though, there does come a point where there is responsibility in how you spend that money. I think there is a general duty of how one should go about one's life.
Terry's spent some of his money on himself. He's also got investments for speculation and for regular income.
I've set aside another portion of money for more local investment, and partly it's local because I want to actually spend time with local business people as well as money with local business people. I think one does get a nice feeling, in a sense, from doing it. It is nice to see people getting jobs that otherwise wouldn't get jobs, businesses getting off the ground that otherwise wouldn't. So that there must be a nice aspect from that.
Terry's creating local jobs by investing £40,000 in Berry Engineering. He'll get tax concessions through the government's business expansion scheme, specifically designed to encourage the rich to channel money into small businesses. The company makes scales, and they would freely admit that they are not at the white-hot end of industrial advance. But with Terry's money, turnover is now 300% up, and they've taken on 2 more employees, bringing the payroll to 5. The business is now doing well. If Terry hadn't come along, what would have happened to the company?
Well, there is this danger that we would have possibly disappeared off the scene altogether.
Are there many other people, do you think, like Terry Hitchcock around?
Well, I haven't come across them. There may well be, but I certainly haven't come across them so far.
But it was to a world far removed from weighing scales, but only just up the road, that Mrs. Thatcher recently came to Cambridge to celebrate personal enterprise. The 6 directors of this company have sunk £200,000 of their own money into making computer chips.
So we could go back to there.
Although they have only a 5% stake, it was this personal initiative that Mrs. Thatcher commended.
Lessons it's got is that you use your talent and ability, cooperating with those who've know about business, that it becomes prosperous. That's how Britain's first industrial revolution was built, and how the second one's being built.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Stephen Bacon. My colleague here is Phil Ladbrokes, and we're from a company in Cambridge called NetConnect.
It's now up to these millionaires to keep that revolution alive. Summoned on a May morning by the Cambridge Enterprise Agency to a so-called marriage of big money and small business.
Here. We'd like to give you a general introduction to NetConnect, who we are and what we do.
On one side of the room, millionaires with money to invest in the business expansion scheme, and facing them in turn from the front, 4 men with ideas in need of the millionaires' capital.
That's it in its packaging. The product is now fully developed. It is fully...
They heard Martin Payne, who's already in production with a computer modem, and wants more money to market it. Then the money men heard Simon Powell appeal for them to back his latest idea.
We have developed a pneumatic umbrella. It's spoke-free and it's asymmetrical. If you think about it, you hold it in one hand. All this is wasted space. So we have shortened it that side, changed the shape, and made it so that it's simply got a pump in the handle. There you are, your umbrella. Get it crushed in the doors, folds up, no problem.
From one of those. Over lunch, the pleading went on, but none of the wealthy present chose to risk their money.
Even if you totally ignore the things,
I work 16 to 18 hours a day to get this thing through. What I need is one...
In fact, a report this month from the Small Business Research Trust says that the business expansion scheme has failed small entrepreneurs like these. The report says that BES money is not backing small manufacturing companies. They're too high risk, preferring instead low-risk service sector companies like retail and property companies. And that jobs it is creating are mostly in the already wealthy South East and East Anglia.
The business expansion scheme is indiscriminate. It is not cost-effective in terms of jobs. It is dependent on the whims of a few investors. It actually transfers money from the north, which needs money, to the south. And there can be no evidence that the business expansion scheme is a better way of creating jobs than, for example, regional development grants, which the government abolished.
I wonder whether it delivers on the double count, being efficient in the sense of distributing more wealth around the country, and a more effective way of creating jobs.
Well, I think what we've got to do is to look at the world as it was when BES was first introduced. We'd got out of the habit of making equity investments. We'd lived through such a long period in which all enterprise was frowned on and was squashed effectively by tax measures that we had to do something to restore the sense of people backing others to set up new businesses. And it's a way of funneling money which I think has been effective to see a whole new equity investment society arise.
Well, I didn't hear you say they rang...
But the trickle-down theory doesn't just depend on how the rich invest, but how they spend.
Since they ran, the weather's been a lot better.
The more Terry Hitchcock's family spends, the more people will be employed to provide them with what they need.
I think it's always surprising to people how their expenditure increases quite naturally with their income until their income reaches a very high level indeed. And indeed, I think that unless people have been earning a significant sum of money for quite a few years or have amassed capital, a lot of people just keep on spending.
And in East Anglia, the earth and the economy are clearly moving. The rich are busy upgrading their needs to match their newfound wealth.
Well, we're in swimming pools and it's going great. Absolutely fantastic at the moment. Can't beat it.
The old university town of Cambridge is benefiting from a high-tech-led consumer boom. The unemployment rate is down to an enviable 3.4%. And as a new prosperous community grows around the booming companies, the new rich are spending their money.
Things are just getting better and better. In any one month, we could be selling upwards of 20 new motor cars with a value of £500,000.
Well, we have people walking into the premises here. They're interested in golf courses, in swimming pools, in luxury property. We're providing that for them in the Western Algarve in Portugal, and they're buying houses on average price £125,000.
People are not saving, they are consuming. And so it would seem that those folks who've received a nice little bonus in their pay packets or in their monthly salary check as a result of the tax cuts are using it to have an extra holiday or to build a swimming pool on the side of the house, all of which creates work, but doesn't create the basis of productive strength for the future.
What's the difference? What's the difference between so-called reinvestment and so-called blown away? Will I spend it, will I recirculate it, or will I save it? You only do one of those three things with it. And if I put it into savings, it gets reinvested. If I go and spend it, well, it goes to give somebody else profit. If I go to a restaurant, that gives jobs in the restaurant. If I go and buy a car, that goes and gives jobs to those who make the car and those who service it and those who distribute it. So really, as long as we see wealth creation processes going on, as long as the whole of society continues to get better off, that is really what the economy should do.
You may have seen recently in the press, since the turn of the year, we have been awarded a further £18 million worth of work.
An old Cambridge building company, revived on the current boom, celebrates its success.
Which will in fact double the company's turnover in the space of 2 years.
Success here is already snowballing. With the price of houses in Cambridge going up so fast they're set to double every 2.5 years, these people have, for the moment, found a goose that lays the golden egg. But if the trickle-down theory is correct, then prosperity in places like Cambridge should already be spilling over elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Good evening, a very warm welcome. Nice to be back in St. Helens with you. That's all beat the finest rugby team in the country, am I right?
St. Helens on Merseyside has an unemployment rate 5 times that of Cambridge. 17% of the population are out of work. The vast majority of the £8,000 a week bar takings at this club doesn't come from locals, but from outsiders coming into town from better off areas, who contribute up to 70% of the Saturday night revenue.
Just walking out the door, the clock struck 12. Cuckoo come on and said, "Hey man, it's the midnight hour." Yeah.
Oh, you love her. We all love Maggie, don't we?
As the economy in the northwest in general begins to improve, St. Helens is missing out. Elsewhere, house prices are beginning to climb. The club's comedian comes from nearby Southport.
It's gone berserk in the area where I live. It's gone mad. Houses are selling now within the hour. You go to the estate agent. You don't go to the estate agents to look at the brochures now. You ring up and meet at 9 o'clock Monday morning. Anything new, anything come on the market.
But in St. Helens, some prices are actually falling.
You've walked down Elephant Lane now, and you've got new houses here outside of the club, and I can vandalise because they can't sell them. They've been up 18 months.
Do you see any evidence that the boom that's been in the south is actually coming north to St. Helens?
It's a long time coming. It's a long time coming.
St. Helens is in this position because we've lost 20,000 jobs in 10 years through being largely dependent upon glass and coal.
But the government says that market forces will eventually compensate.
Market forces have not compensated, and indeed it makes things even worse for us. As fast as we are creating jobs, we are losing jobs. Up to November last year we had 2,400 jobs in British coal. Today we have 1,480. That's in less than 6 months.
The prospect of St. Helens becoming an economic black hole is one that worries John Royal in particular. He's one of the very few who've done very well. Born and bred in St. Helens, he'd established a local estate agents. Last year, the Prudential made him an offer he didn't refuse, and it said he's now a millionaire. Although he'd like to reinvest more of his money in St. Helens, he won't because he's not confident that he'll get the rate of return he needs. The people whose money could revive the town have been leaving.
Over the last 5 to 10 years, to my personal knowledge, a lot of business people who have businesses in St. Helens, senior managers, executives of local companies have gradually moved out of the town and lived in North Cheshire and Southwood and Ormskirk. And I think this has been, in a sense, the start of a downward spiral because their money, which they earn locally, is being spent outside the borough
Barry Houghton, formerly of Factory Row, St Helens, is one of those who've taken his family and their spending power away to live beside a lake in a very attractive part of Cheshire. Barry Houghton's not a millionaire, yet, but he is the only shareholder of a very successful engineering company in St Helens and may soon go public. His family were delighted when he was invited 4 years ago to meet the Prime Minister at number 10 for what was called a reception for success. St Helens may not yet be, Mr Houghton and his company, Rainford, are.
As far as Rainford is concerned, there's a very definite trickle from the southeast. It's not a trickle indeed, because in the order of 70 or 75% of our business would come from the south or from internationally indeed, and only 25%, 20% from the local areas. We absolutely get a benefit from the boom in the south. We have, for instance, 70% of our sales force living there. But I do think that we, Rainford, are unusual. I don't think we're the norm in our part of the world.
The business inside this former pub is more typical of the difficulties in St Helens. Founded by 2 local salesmen, it has created 18 jobs, printing and distributing business mementos. But staff wages will have to remain below union levels until the company can start earning a regular profit. It's the narrow edge of the enterprise culture where the risk of falling off is ever present. Was there ever a moment when you thought you might go under?
Oh, absolutely.
Every 6 weeks?
2, 3, yeah. Every 6 weeks, yeah.
Literally.
They're now getting orders from other parts of the country where the economy is doing better, so there is some trickle down. But the deeds of both the co-founders' houses are with the bankers. Personal benefit is slow in coming.
And it's true to say we're still paying personal loans back to help stop the company going under a couple of years ago to keep the business going. We now took out further personal loans that we pay back out of that salary as well.
So you're not really any better off personally than you were before?
Not at all.
No expansion of the business mementos market will turn this area here into a science park. St Helens' 1,700 acres of derelict industrial ground points to potential wealth if only it could be redeveloped. But John Royal, estate agent and magistrate, and Barry Houghton believe that if the government's policy is just to give money to the rich and rely on it seeping down, it won't be enough for St Helens.
I think the recent changes in the tax situation in the budget has been a divisive measure as far as St Helens is concerned. I will be much better off, there's no doubt about it, and it makes me feel uncomfortable because I know through my work in St Helens and my involvement in the bench that a lot of people who will not benefit by these tax changes will suffer as a result.
I think it's difficult for St Helens in the long run. There will be many more companies like ours coming up in St Helens. They will help the local economy. There's lots of drive and ambition, but there is a lot to take up. And I do believe that there needs to be serious government assistance if St Helens is to come back to the fore as it used to be.
So what you're saying is that the market alone isn't going to be enough?
I don't believe the market force alone will be enough unless we wait a very long time.
It was here at Conservative Central Office, on the very night of her election victory last June, that Mrs Thatcher took on board the need to do something about the inner cities. She is determined not to plug the gap with more government grants. Instead, she is now calling on the wealth creators, both business and individuals, to exercise a greater responsibility than just creating wealth for themselves. Mrs Thatcher came to Lancaster House in London last month to endorse her new challenge to business, to use its wealth to help those not provided for by the enterprise economy. She was flanked by Sir Hector Lang, co-treasurer of the Tory party, and the United States Ambassador Charles Price.
This way, sorry. Along the lines I've just mentioned.
Assembled there to listen, 100 of the chief executives from some of the most prestigious companies on either side of the Atlantic. IBM, Prudential, Roundtree's, Gillette.
Recently, there has been
They aim to raise the amount of money they're currently giving and to be more open about the charitable work they do.
We note now that Marks & Spencer has prepared a special bulletin on this and that other companies are...
In the audience listening, the head of American Express, Jim Robinson. His company gave $21 million last year to help those in the States who wouldn't benefit from trickle down there.
Every day at the American Express cafeteria, 1,300 people are served breakfast, and more than 2,700 people are served lunch.
Can I have tuna fish on rye?
One thing American Express does is to help an organization that scours corporate kitchens, like theirs, for surplus food. This is then distributed to the needy on the streets. 6 million meals have been provided this way at a cost of 50 cents a meal. American Express say it's not charity, but enlightened self-interest. Do you have any difficulty explaining to your shareholders why you're doing that?
None whatsoever.
Why not?
And the reason is that if the community around us is doing well, then we have the opportunity to do even better.
When Mrs. Thatcher came to make an impromptu speech, it was not so much to the businessmen's self-interest that she appealed, but she called instead for the resurrection of the 19th century obligations of the city fathers.
I see the movement of business in the community here and the President's initiative in the United States as restoring not only the integration of industry and commerce in the life of the city, but something much, much deeper than that. To me, some of the most exciting things that you are doing is saying to young people, look, we are interested in your future. We can help you with your future. It is not only money. Yes, of course you can't do it without money. But it's because we want to get involved again with your future and are interested in you.
Then Sir Hector Lang set a target for his fellow businessmen.
Let me now throw down a challenge to British companies. If we want to leave to our children and grandchildren a legacy of which we and they can be proud, then the level of giving from all UK companies represented here must be at least 1%. With a bit of thinning out on the inside, I think.
Sir Hector, chairman of United Biscuits, personifies Mrs. Thatcher's vision. He sees a sense of social and personal responsibility flowing from the considerable benefits that he received from the budget.
It made a substantial difference to my income. If you wanted numbers, it gave me about another 50,000 a year, something like that.
Can you point to any way in which the extra money will actually benefit the rest of society?
Well, first of all, we will be employing more people personally as a family. I hope that we will be using some of that money to help people start new businesses. Certainly more will go in the charitable field.
So how does that square with Sir Hector's business making 1,000 people redundant in Halifax a month ago? Sadly necessary, says Sir Hector, to preserve the jobs of those who remain. A more modern plant will open up soon in Carlisle, and the Halifax workers will have priority. 5 years ago, United Biscuit made another 2,000 people redundant in Liverpool. Despite having no factory in the city any longer, the company still contributes £25,000 a year to this privately run skill centre.
I'm about 5. This is my 5th week now.
I've always wanted to not necessarily be a bricklayer, but to lay bricks, and you would think it would take me about 10 weeks to learn, do you?
No, more than that.
More than that?
At least 6 months to get it now.
This training school is the early vision of a greatly expanded social commitment by business in the future. Sir Hector's is not the only company involved. Ford's, the CGB, and Lloyd's Bank are behind it too. Such private ventures into social welfare are criticised by the opposition as so much misdirected energy.
The first responsibility of business in this country should be to train, to research, to do the work in innovation, and to ensure a degree of personal comfort and decent living standards for the workforces over which they have responsibility. The idea that having failed to do many of these things, companies should then take over parts of the welfare state and the health service, and should be responsible, for example, for setting up schools for the children of workers whom they don't properly train, seems to me quite perverse.
I think it's a very sad day when we look to the government for everything. We went through decades or more with saying that they must. But in a democracy, there is no they, only we. And therefore we must, both individually and corporately, play our part. Because we're better at doing it individually than governments.
You think that business is better at giving and organising in the community than the government?
Yes, I do. I think government is pulling back from various aspects of our society, and if we don't take a step forward in business, there is going to be a vacuum which we will all regret.
In St Helens, Lady Pilkington and her family have been filling that gap for years. They're a family whose sense of duty goes back a long way.
Well, here you can see in 1066 there was Leonard Pilkington who fought with King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. And then he went in 1096 on the First Crusade, and that's where he got the cross, the Maltese.
Pilkington Glass has been St Helens' major employer for over a century.
And also the Pilkington lorries.
Lady Pilkington has her own charity that she dispenses in the community of St Helens. There are also charitable trusts specifically set up for the welfare of the workers and the Pilkington Company and their families. Chiropody is free. Last century, the firm was amongst the first to found schools for the children of the workers and bring in a company pension scheme. But Pilkingtons have to fund giving out of profits. What if philanthropy and profit conflict? Last year, Pilkington was threatened with takeover by BTR. The town successfully rallied to the company, fearful a new owner wouldn't be as generous. Pilkington's experience demonstrated the difficult balance between answering to their shareholders and the needs of the community. For the past 5 years, the amount of money given away by Pilkingtons as a percentage of profits has been declining on average. In 1983, the company gave just under 0.4%, a third of £1,000,000. The figure rose slightly in '86, only to fall sharply away following the threatened takeover by BTR. By comparison, Sir Hector Lang's United Biscuit Group have maintained a higher proportion of giving against profits over the same period, between 0.6 and 0.7%. Last year, they gave nearly £1,000,000. But by contrast, BTR believe in paying their shareholders who can then choose what to do with their money. Consequently, their corporate giving is tiny, and from profits of nearly £600 million last year, they gave away just 100,000.
The first time that there's any dip in the economy, the private sector would be the first to stop investing in social welfare. And why shouldn't they? It isn't their responsibility, it's government's responsibility. When that dip comes and when that investment stops in social fabric, then the people will look to the local authority to pick up any shortfall that there may be, and we will not have the money to do so.
But it's not only companies that the government are relying on for a new sense of social responsibility. They're also calling on individuals who have made money themselves to become involved in bettering the lot of the less well-off through private giving to charity.
Now, Mrs. Dixon, while you're on the line, we've got special offers. A pair of beach towels today, they're only £9.99 for the pair. Shall I send them out?
This is Littlewoods, the Liverpool mail-order firm. A year ago, the Chancellor asked them to use their commercial expertise to organise the government's new Give As You Earn scheme. Mail order in one room, right next door, the same staff but a different message in the payroll giving section.
Do you know basically how it works? All right, payroll giving is basically a tax-free way for employees to give to a charity of their choice through their pay, whether it be a local charity or a national charity or even the local Boy Scout movement.
Though the take-up is increasing, it's still only 2% of those asked.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What chance is there, then, that the very highly paid, like those in the City of London, will plough their windfall from tax cuts into charity? The Charity AIDS Foundation commissioned some research for Panarama.
We're interviewing people who were on 60% of tax prior to the 1988 budget. Could I speak to your boss?
The researchers phoned up 100 executives to find out how they'd spend the money.
In what way do you think you would invest it? Shares. Any other way? Yes. Luxury items such as boats. Yes. Home improvements. Holidays. Other leisure activities.
The vast majority will put their extra money into shares and savings and reducing debts. Then they'll go on to spend it on luxuries or a holiday. Only 3 said they'd give it to charity.
Right. Now, Mrs. Thatcher has called for a return to private philanthropy, saying that when you have finished as a taxpayer, you have not finished in your duty as a citizen. To what extent do you...
But when prompted by the questioner whether they thought they ought to give more to charity, just over half of them agreed they should.
Now, why do you say...
The Charities Aid Foundation concludes there is a reservoir of good intention, but it will need tapping.
I think we are going to see a considerable increase in people's willingness to get involved in and willingness to pay for, on a voluntary basis, charitable activity, the voluntary sector. I rather hope myself that this won't, at any rate in the short term, lead to any diminution of state responsibility and state expenditure, and the two can be put together. I think it's perfectly reasonable, however, if charitable activity grows and grows and grows, then at some future date, some future government might decide that we don't need all this state expenditure, and this experiment has really triumphed.
At the Docklands Ball in London's East End, the rich from the city have gathered to raise money for a local children's hospital. Among the guests, the Duke of Westminster, the richest man in Britain. Much of the success or failure of the government's approach will now depend on the public example shown by people like him. The Duke's task as chairman of the appeal was to stir in the hearts of those who were already well off and having a good time an understanding of why they should care.
I was shown a photograph, and for those of you who are coming in tonight may have seen the same. I was shown a photograph of the London Hospital Children's Unit 100 years ago. The only difference was that the light fittings had changed and the nurses' uniforms had changed as well. Otherwise, there was no difference whatsoever.
If the conscience of the rich is touched, there are Tory thinkers who believe the role of government could then be massively reduced.
If you can now open up the debate to show that to carry that beneficial, vigorous, recreative, regenerative process into welfare will actually have some of the same benefits that you have in industry and commerce, then the moral presumption of government responsibility for all of the welfare of the whole population will begin to crumble.
Why should we return to the 19th century when, despite an enormous expansion in wealth, the free market created within its wake enormous poverty, deprivation, and destitution, with which companies, despite all the promises, could not cope, and charities could not deal with? And that is exactly the problem that we would face in the 1980s if we returned to the free market forces that Mrs. Thatcher wants us to.
But first, the question is whether those most successful at making money can be persuaded to give their money away as well. For the government, it's a risk, but an essential part of their evolving strategy.
Capitalism as such is always evolving. It's not the laissez-faire system that existed 100 years ago, and it'll be very different in 50 years' time. What we're seeing is this balanced society evolving now, creating wealth and looking after the less fortunate. Some responsibility on government, but more responsibility in the individual. And what the Thatcher years are doing is shifting that balance of responsibility away from all on the state, so that it rests equally, perhaps, between the state and the individual.
Do you feel that you should be giving more?
Well, that's a very good question. I find it very hard to work out in my own mind whether 2% is right, 4% is right, 10% is right. After all, if you go back to the parables, you have stories that would imply you're supposed to be giving away 99%. So I find it very difficult to judge that. I'm still evolving my own answer, quite honestly.
What about money? Putting money into charities? Do you think you have a responsibility to do that?
I don't think so, no. I think that the responsibility is, in fact, to put money into the people that work for us. And if those people are contributing, which we believe they do, there's enormous effort from everyone concerned, then I consider it more important that money goes to those people, whether they be the storeman, the forklift driver, or the skilled people we employ.
Is DB1. Sorry, you're not getting that. Because unfortunately the vehicle...
As Britain's wealth has increased, there are many who know the price of nearly everything, including this car being auctioned for charity.
5,001, 5,002, 5,002, 55. You're very, very close to the right price.
The car raised its market value, but the rich are now being asked to support something more, with a serious risk to them if they fail to deliver.
The whole ethos of the Conservative government in giving freedom to industry and less tax to individuals rests on the assumption that if they do, the industry and people will help in the community in a way they can't if there's total control. And therefore, if we fail to do it, we will be failing capitalism and the government.
After 9 years of Conservative government, those who have profited have much to thank it for. Now they are being asked if they have a conscience too. They have to prove themselves once again.